I like to think that I keep an active eye on any new games that might interest me, but sometimes I get completely blindsided by a rough gem that hits all my marbles. Such is the case of Ultra Age, a game that came out for PC just a couple of weeks ago, but is actually an enhanced port of a game from last year, product of a collaboration between two South Korean studios. Next Stage has been in the business for a few years, but they have previously only ever worked on an obscure hack and slash called The Dice's Cast, released all the way back in 2016 for Android and PlayStation 4. And speaking of PlayStation, Visual Dart has existed for over 2 decades and have been involved in some of the biggest names in the industry, including Uncharted and The Last of Us, but you've probably never heard of them. They are primarily an outsourcing company focused on 2D artwork and 3D modeling, the invisible hands behind the pretty graphics in some of your favorite games. But not this time. Both companies are front and center in this original game, and it's pretty cool. The year is 3174, and mankind finds itself in a bit of a pickle. The planet's resources have been exhausted, and a calamity turned the surface into a wasteland. Some people escaped to space and established Orbit, a space colony, while others retreated into the Shelter, a massive underground bunker. You play as Age, a snarky anime protagonist with a name that carries all the subtlety of a jackhammer. For plot reasons, Age only has 7 days left to live, but Orbit's leader promises to grant him eternal life in exchange for bringing an old relic back to orbit. Together with his partner Helphis, Age drops down to Earth to find the relic, but the situation gets complicated when some of Orbit's own robots start attacking him. Age finds the relic, but on the way back they're attacked by Medea, the leader of a squad who went rogue and hacked the robots. Helphis is destroyed, and Age gets final smashed down a cliff, but manages to snatch the relic before plummeting down into a title drop. 12 hours later, he wakes up and somehow Helphis got transferred to the relic, so now he can make giant swords and time travel. And so the two go on a journey to find a spaceship that can take them back to orbit. It's a whole lot of sci-fi schlock if you want to put it that way. No matter how many fancy words it throws at the player, ultimately it's a simple tale of extremely predictable betrayal and a hero who won't back down no matter what destiny has in store for him. But I'm not saying that the story is boring. Discovering the mystery behind the relic and H's condition is at least an intriguing motivator, but the game is more concerned with being cool than being well written. I'm just saying that this is the game that touches on existentialism while you fight a Zoid, so you should keep your expectations in check. Just press the buttons and enjoy the fireworks. At a basic level, Ultra Age follows the standard action game blueprint. You have levels to explore, doors to open, and the local wildlife to exterminate with giant sushi knives. The levels take you from point to point, with some combat and cutscenes in the middle. The fundamentals are all there, light and heavy attacks that can be combined to perform different combos, a dodge move gives you a brief moment of invincibility, and a simple upgrade system lets you unlock new abilities and enhance your current ones. You also get a hook that can pull you towards enemies or vice versa, and Helphis is there to support you with a couple of abilities, such as Critical Rage, the game's temporary power-up that massively increases your damage output. More importantly, killing enemies restores Helphis' energy, which can be spent to restore H's health, or it can be converted into the time travel button. It makes sense in context. During the prologue, H's blade is broken, and now you have to MacGyver new ones from crystal clusters found throughout the world. Each type of crystal produces its own blade, with different movesets, properties and upgrades. The steel blade is a short and fast weapon that is effective against most enemies. The katana is especially good against flesh but does poor damage to robots, while the claymore deals lots of damage to robots and crowd controls like a nuclear warhead. The lightning sword eats shields for breakfast and can paralyze robots. The gunblade can fire projectiles at the end of a combo, and the charged claymore gathers energy as it hits enemies. The bad news is that these blades are fragile and smacking enemies will gradually drop their durability. The good news is that once it drops low enough, you can trigger a powerful break blade attack. This instantly breaks the blade, and then switches to a replacement if you have any spares. Some crystals instead produce modules, which you can equip to increase your base stats. The bonus is totally random, but you can always try again in 12 in-game hours. It's not actually real time, however. That would be stupid. It's just flavor text. The game simply skips 12 hours whenever you trigger the time travel ability. And yes, this mechanic did just take a large dump over the plot. You can also salvage power gears from broken drones, and defeating enemies will award you crystal fragments. Both of these can be spent at save points to purchase various upgrades that improve each blade and your core abilities. I also mentioned that this is an enhanced port, and that's because the developers went back and upgraded parts of the game for the PC release. Certain visuals and cutscenes were improved and optimized for better performance. More save points were added to the harder sections, and H himself got a facelift. Of course, it's also a game that has to run on the Switch, and what it lacks in technical output, it attempts to make up for with style. The port runs decently well too. It supports high frame rates, and like my dumb YouTuber brain, the settings scale all the way down to potato, so people with lower end machines can still get a smooth experience. It might not seem like it from some of the footage, but the game just really doesn't like being recorded. And before you ask, Ultra H does support ultra-wide resolutions. The voice acting was also completely redone. And look, it won't win any awards, but it's at least okay, and the PC version includes both English and Japanese dubs. Either way, all these changes have also been backported to the console versions as a patch, so you're not missing out on that. And now that I've gone through the basics, I can start chirking over the combat, something that speaks to me at a biological level. Ultra Age knows exactly what it wants to be. Fast-paced, stylish character action that lets you cockslap enemies in the air for several seconds. The developers took inspiration from games like Devil May Cry, and it wears that inspiration on its sleeve. If you squint really hard, H almost looks like a deadweight. The depth comes from mixing each blade's moveset in an efficient way. You can only equip 4 at a time, and some moves are shared between them, but that's still a lot of moves. Besides their basic moveset, each weapon also has its own change attack, which despite the name can be used without changing to a different weapon, something that can be useful in many cases. The steel blade and the gun blade both send your enemy into the air, while the claymores parry enemies and launch a counterattack. The steel blade and the lightning sword share basic combos, but they have different properties that make them useful in different situations. The gun blade also shares the basic 4-hit light attack combo, but is otherwise completely unique, and serves its own role in combat. The weakest link is the charged claymore, which should have just been a story upgrade for the regular claymore. Unlike the lightning sword, both claymores are practically identical aside from the blade break attack. Its only differentiating factor is that it charges energy in combat, but I'm not sure it does anything besides letting you destroy certain walls that only appear 2 or 3 times in the entire game. Turning the lightning sword into an upgrade for the steel blade could also work, but again, they have enough differences between them to justify being separate weapons. Breakable weapons in a fast-paced action game also sounds like a recipe for disaster, but the system works very well. Maybe too well, because running out of spares is something that basically never happens, so in practice you can think of the durability system as a gauge that charges up and lets you unleash a powerful attack when it's full, rather than a resource management mechanic. The only cock-up with the combat mechanics is a lack of options in the air. You can only trigger blade breaks on the ground, and change attacks simply use the aerial heavy attack. The exception is the gunblade, which for some reason is the only weapon with a unique change attack in the air. It's a bit strange. Besides these quirks, it's a very freeform combat system where you can easily cancel out of your current attack to avoid damage or move to a more favorable position, which you will have to do from start to finish. H can survive a few mistakes, but you won't get far by simply mashing buttons at random. Enemy attacks generally have clear and predictable tells, so you have to pay attention. But as long as you do that, you will make progress. It's challenging, but never overwhelming. Some of the bosses will smack you until you learn them, but you always know that you're some steps away from beating them. You just need to make less mistakes next time. And when you beat them, it will feel really good. And when you try again and do much better than your first victory, it will feel even better, because it shows you're improving at the game. Special mention to the final boss, which ends the game with a bang. Sorry for spoiling it, but you've gotta see this to understand the point I'm trying to make. A 1 versus 1 duel with a humanoid that uses melee weapons might be a very overused trope, but there's a reason for that. It makes for very intense gameplay that tests your fundamental skills, rather than relying on gimmicks that work one time and then become a snooze on replays. It's no coincidence that some of the most memorable boss battles in action game history are built on this simple concept, while the Rhino is on the opposite end since all you do is attack the crystals on its body until the game lets you warp on top of it. Repeat it a few times and there you go. While it certainly doesn't have the same technical depth as some of its peers, reaching a high skill level still demands a lot from the player, and the game will give back just as much to those who put the time in. It's the kind of satisfying combat system that a certain demographic loves to dissect, just to get better and more stylish. The cool action shots aren't just in cutscenes, you become the cutscene. It's a game that's begging for multiple playthroughs, so it's a real shame that it doesn't incentivize the player to do so due to its lack of anything besides the single player campaign. The game has no unlockables, no new game plus, no option to replay specific sections, no turbo mode or bloody palace kind of extras. Ultra H is so starved for content you'd almost think it was subscribed to my channel. My biggest disappointment is that hard mode doesn't seem to do much beyond increasing damage and slicing your crystals in half every time you die. Supposedly enemies are more aggressive, but in practice it's hard to tell if there's any difference, since you still fight the exact same enemies. And if you played through normal difficulty first, not getting hit as much isn't a challenge, it's expected. It's obvious that the game isn't the most polished, nor did it have the biggest budget, so while I do have some very high praise for it, I also have some low punches to throw at its face. As the kids say nowadays, this game friggin' slaps, but it also takes you on a vacation to a recycling center. The game has 4 variants of the basic robot enemies, and at least as many for the Draples. One even ascends to being a boss. Twice. To be fair, the boss version only shares their basic attacks, and everything else is completely unique, like the laser that creates electric barriers over the room. That's something I can give to most of the game's bosses. They evolve as the battle progresses, using new attack patterns or tweaking those they already use to sweep your legs and try to get you to kiss the floor. This is another reason why the Rhino is so boring by comparison. It doesn't test your skills, just your eyeballs. Oh, and you also get to fight it twice, because of course you do. Welcome to Recycle City. Some of the bosses also bring out the worst of the camera, notably how the lock-on function disengages whenever an enemy disappears for any reason. And that's a problem when that enemy is moving around at the speed of fast. The low budget also rears its ugly head in some technical aspects, such as awkward freeze frames in cutscenes or the sometimes weak sound design, with certain effects being too loud or too quiet compared to everything else. Those randomized mazes also seem like an attempt at extending playtime in as cheaply as possible. Maybe the incoming DLC will do something interesting with them, but right now they aren't, and the randomized nature means that you can get groups of enemies that don't play very well in tight spaces. If nothing else, maybe this randomization could be applied to the rest of the game as a bonus mode to increase replayability. And speaking of random, the module system leaves me a bit perplexed. It's bad enough that you have to spend a bunch of power gears just so you can equip them, but I also have to wonder if they make any meaningful difference, besides HP at least. I just don't see anyone bothering to reroll randomized stats in a game that's all about timing and reflexes. Why would you ever go back for a better bonus of +1? In conclusion, the developers have made a very fun game that serves as a solid foundation, but it needs to be built upon further. I certainly will be keeping my eyes on it, but until then, this game is a bit of a hard sell for most people, at least without a discount. I've mentioned Devil May Cry multiple times as a positive point of comparison, but this is also where it comes to bite this game's ass. Devil May Cry 5 bundled with the Virgil DLC on sale goes for less than Ultra H's full price, and you just can't compete with that. It gives you all the shine and polish of a AAA game, an incredibly deep combat system with a long campaign and multiple extras to unlock, and 3 characters that are a joy to play with, and you can also play as V if you want. Ultra H's core gameplay is great fun, but it's very short and lacks replayability. My first playthrough took about 5 hours, and that is including cutscenes. It's a short experience that you can blaze through in a single afternoon. But hey, if it keeps you engaged for that entire afternoon, it's probably doing at least something right.